Okay guys, once you have your webbing completely pinned on, that's a checkpoint for me to come over and make sure that you have all of those little printed lines covered. So you should have the whole thing with pins about 3 fingers apart, and you should have a pin on the very ends marking where the end of that rectangle is. So you should have a pin right on top on those 2 ends. Then I'm going to check for pins all the way down on both sides. And then same thing, pins marking the end over here. Once you have that, you're ready to sew. You're going to want to thread your machine, if it's not threaded already, with the webbing color. Okay, so you have to sew your webbing on with thread that matches it. So in this case, I'm going to use black thread. Okay guys, now you're ready to sew once you get the okay from me that everything looks good for your pinning. So remember, again, your machine should be threaded with the webbing color, and you should also roll up the 4 squares that are hanging off of the side of the bag right next to your webbing, and you should pin those out of your way. So just roll them, keep them out of the way so that they don't get sewn onto the webbing, because they're very hard to seam rip. Okay guys, to get this under the machine, it's not the easiest thing in the world. So what you're going to do is take the side that you've also rolled up this little rectangle, fold that fabric over a little bit so that you can actually get your needle right here where you need to. So you're going to start right by that top pin that you put in there. And remember, you're going to sew as close to the edge of your webbing as possible. So you're not going to use the edge of the presser foot. You're going to sew as close to the edge without going off onto the bag. So I'm going to put my presser foot down here and start right where that pin is. Now you don't have to take your pins out while you're sewing, as long as your needle is not going to hit those pins. Okay guys, I tried to switch the camera angle so that you can see a little bit better for what we're actually going to sew. But I'm going to put my needle down. Make sure your needle down button is pressed on the machine, and then make sure you're at half speed, because sewing webbing, sewing through everything can be really difficult and you'll want to go slow. So I'm going to roll my bag over just so that it fits under the machine nicely. And your biggest concern, I guess, while sewing is that something is going to get caught underneath here that shouldn't get caught underneath here. So make sure as you're going that you can always see these rolled up edges on the side, and that you can see or that you're holding this part on this side. That will ensure that the only thing under the machine is the part that should be there. So you're going to start sewing, back stitch, and then you're just going to continue to sew all the way down, and you'll see I'm sewing really close to that edge, and my presser foot is about halfway in between the bag and the actual webbing. Now I'm sewing one giant rectangle all the way down. If you're sewing and you start to be able to see any of those white printed lines showing, then what you want to do is stop right there and call me over, because we may have to seam rip, and it will be easier if we stop right when you see them than if you sew the entire thing. Now, once you get to this section, I don't know if you can see in the video, I think you can a little, but I have my reinforcement X right here. So when you sew over this next small section, it's going to be very thick, so you'll want to go extra slow just to be able to get your needle through all that. Okay, then once you're done with the reinforcement X, you can pick up the pace a little bit more. Now you'll see in this section, I'm coming up to the pocket here. So you'll see the pocket line on this side, and then it goes all the way down. You're going to sew right through that pocket. That's a good thing. So just keep sewing right on the edge like normal. And if this part starts getting in the way, just stop, try to refold it. Now, slow down as you get to your final pin here, because we're going to go right up to it, and I'm just going to go a stitch or two past the pin. Then you're going to lift up And now you're going to pivot. Now for this pin, my needle would hit it, so I'm just going to take it out. Put my presser foot back down, and we're going to sew straight across. Okay, once I get to the edge, I'm going to lift up. And this part is very tricky to pivot because you have so much fabric. So you're just going to lift up your fabric and put it all toward you, pretty much in your lap. So take your time lifting that up and straightening everything out, because you want it to be right so you don't have to re-sew anything. So now, I'm going to make my way back down the side of the webbing. And as you guys can see, I'm not taking my pins out because my needle is not going to hit them. And check every so often that nothing extra is underneath your bag. Alright guys, and you'll see I'm getting to the end of my webbing. So what I'm going to do for this one, I'm going to take a couple extra stitches. Once you get here, you're going to lift up, turn, and this is the final pivot that you have to make. Put your presser foot down, and you're going to sew straight across to where you started, and you should have this little thread there to show you where you started, so we're just going to sew right across. And then you're just going to back stitch. And you are all done sewing the one side of your webbing on. So you'll pull this out, trim your threads, and then same exact thing on the other side of the webbing.